Welcome to the Life Tracks Podcast. I'm your host, Marvin Bryson. For me, podcasting represents a modern take on oral storytelling traditions. Being born in the very last year of the baby boom, I'm closing in on retirement and have grown comfortable in embracing my role of elder in hopes that future generations might benefit from my experiences. An extra added bonus is that part of my history will also be available for my grandchildren should they want to know more about their pop-pop. As a teen, I landed my first paying gig as a musician. The year was 1979, so I have more than 40 years of stories to share in that venue. My music business background came into play because it informed my first motion picture gig as a music supervisor in 2001. The film was Blue Moon, the late great director Xavier Green's Howard University Fine Arts thesis project. Blue Moon aired on Showtime and marked the debut of notable comedic actress Coco Brown. From there, I focused on motion picture editing, completed a great Avid editing program, and moved to Hollywood. Over the past 20 years, I have compiled over 200 credits on roughly 20 television series and films. So without further ado, let's get into track 3, Floating on a Cloud. After 5 years of serving the dual masters of music and sports in hopes of being successful, my hard work and perseverance paid off in spades. Walking into my first hot property rehearsal was unlike my other first-time experiences, mostly because I was basically home, playing with 2 kids I had grown up with in Parish and Ant. On our block, we had 2 bass players, 6 drummers with the Anderson family drum corps accounting for 3, and 2 guitarists, Greg and me. It wasn't uncommon for everyone to gather on someone's backyard patio for an impromptu jam session, cranking everything up as loud as we could, so we all knew each other's skill level. I remember Parrish working relentlessly for months to add that 16th note go-go swing to his drum beats, perfecting his own style of playing. Ant also played multiple instruments, but at a higher level than me, even though I was older. With Parrish playing drums and Ant on bass, I knew Hot Property's rhythm section was tight. In addition, I found myself walking into a full horn section, a keyboardist, and an outstanding vocalist named Kim. I also knew one of the guitarists, Jock. Jock's father played saxophone in the Army band with Tony's father, a common connection that broke the ice. The other guitarist was this tiny little 13 or 14-year-old kid named Kevin. He was a little guy, but he played his guitar better than most adults I knew. Being 17, I felt like the old head in the group. But having been blessed with more than 40 years of life and living since then, I come to appreciate the difference in the social development of a 14 or 15-year-old versus a 17-year-old. A tactful way to say it is, my new bandmates were an exceptional group of musicians, but very playful. Having scoped this out with the quickness, as my cousin Paul likes to say, I decided to sit back, play my position, work with Jock and Kevin to learn the guitar parts, while also observing the band's dynamics in all sense of the word. After 3 or 4 rehearsals, it was showtime. On that first gig, both Kevin and Jock were there, so there wasn't a ton of pressure on me, but I still wanted to perform well. I would come to enjoy what I deemed as the coolest part of being on the showmobile, never really knowing what band you were going to be billed with at any given venue. One band I remember playing with was Unifunk. Their front man was a guy named Brock, a 6'3", 250-pound quarterback out of Dunbar High School with tons of charisma. He went on to play college football at Elizabeth City State and HBCU in North Carolina. Unifunk also had this cutie named Betty, I think that was her name, on saxophone. Like our keyboardist Carla, there wasn't a lot of women playing instruments back in the day, so they stood out for more than just their playing. Every now and then we get paired up with regionally or nationally known acts like the Northeast Groovers or Trouble Funk. It all made for one memorable summer. I'd be remiss if I didn't state that we also played a lot of cover hits. In the mid-1970s, Chuck Brown and the Soul Searchers and most of the other prominent bands in Washington, D.C. had developed this style where the music never stopped. This is where Joe would kind of let us go and play our own go-go style grooves for interludes or transitions, if you will. Over time, we incorporated our original go-go grooves as show openings and closings. After catching that feeling that can only be experienced by playing original work, I never really looked back and rarely played cover tunes again. July rolled around and it was time for football camp. I had been doing road work during those humid DMV summer nights after rehearsals, so I was in great shape and had a good camp. I also got political too, or so I thought. My first years of high school football was up and down. I was big and fast, so my first year out, our coaches kept me on varsity until the last cut. So by the time I went down to the JV team, they were more or less set. That year I played a lot, but bounced between tight end and outside linebacker. That following spring, I had a run-in with my coach that's not really worth discussing, but basically we were at odds most of my junior year. I remember him cutting 4 of us down to the JV team again. The other guys quit, but I stayed on because I loved playing the game. It was a good thing for me because I started both ways, confirming in my mind that I could play despite what had happened years prior. After I ripped up my ankle, Coach showed a lot of concern, so I let bygones be bygones and got myself in line with the program. Looking back at being 17, I now realize I was a self-starter and not easily swayed by negative experiences. I'm not even sure where it came from, but I would always get up and dust myself off after being knocked down. Moving forward, a guy named Frank that was slated as a starting linebacker left school, so I focused on getting up to speed at playing linebacker in hopes of landing the job. After camp, I returned to hot property and was riding high on regular gigs and paydays. In the 1980s, we had two-a-day football practices for 2.5 weeks. Schools in Maryland opened after Labor Day, so our camps opened on August 15th. I still get a little amped up on August 15th, even today. Thankfully, there was just one band conflict with two-a-days. Coach was familiar with me being in one of the hottest bands in the area, so he excused me from morning practice. That afternoon, I paid the price by running heels. I don't recall how many, but I had to yell capital P, R, I, D, E, a letter at a time at the beginning of each of the last 5 to spell out pride. I'd never been in better shape physically than I was that year. Back in the day, we would have pep rallies before football games. When my name was announced, I'd hear folks in the crowd chanting HP Crew because I was in hot property. That shit was bananas. But being a rhythm guitar player and a linebacker is not like being a band's frontman or a team's quarterback. That kept my ego in check. Our football team went 6-0, and the band's gigs dropped down from 3 or 4 a month because we were back in school. I landed in the newspaper 4 or 5 times that fall. This was before the internet or social media, mind you, so all was right with the world that winter. That following spring, when the all-star teams were announced, I made all-league honorable mention and landed a full scholarship, being fully aware that I couldn't be in a band and play ball. I guess Miss Dolores was right. It would be 6 full years before I got back to playing in another band.